Hi everybody, welcome. My name is Christian Parker. I'm the current chair of the Graduate Theater Program at the School of the Arts. I'm very happy to welcome and introduce our most accomplished guest today. Adrian Noble was the artistic director and chief executive of the Royal Shakespeare Company between 1990 and 2003. Some major highlights from his tenure with the Royal Shakespeare Company include Henry IV, Parts 1 and 2 with Robert Stevens, The Plantagenets with Ray Fiennes, Hamlet and Henry V with Kenneth Branagh, Macbeth with Jonathan Pryce, King Lear with Michael Gambon, As You Like It with Alan Rickman, and Antony and Cleopatra with Helen, Mirren, and Michael Gambon, just to name a few. He has directed plays at the National Theater and numerous productions on the West End. On our shores, he was the artistic director of the Old Globe Shakespeare Festival in San Diego from 2010 to 2013. He has also worked in opera, most recently directing Verdi's Macbeth with Anna Netrebko at the Metropolitan Opera. He most recently directed, or not most recently, but he also recently directed Kate Bush's much anticipated return to live performance with a sold out series of shows Before the Dawn in London. He's an honorary doctor at 4 British universities, an honorary fellow of the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, visiting professor of the University of the Arts London, and an honorary bencher of Middle Temple. He has received 15 Olivier Award nominations in addition to numerous other international awards, and he has written a book titled How to Do Shakespeare, and is working on a second book on directing Shakespeare. He joins us today as the current Mellon visiting artist and thinker at Columbia University School of the Arts. With the generous support of the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, this program creates opportunities for undergraduate and graduate students to work with world-class artists and thinkers while stimulating dialogue about the contribution of the arts to intellectual life and society at large. We're really grateful to the Mellon Foundation for supporting this program. He spent most of last weekend with a group of our MFA theater students in all different disciplines investigating Shakespeare, a workshop that's going to continue tomorrow for most of the day. As the chair of the theater program that is steeped in the classics, I am especially grateful that he has chosen to spend some of his time in New York this fall with us at Columbia. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Adrian Noble.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I travel quite a lot, and it's very interesting that I find that the measure of any civilization is the quality of welcome it gives to strangers, and the quality of welcome in 116th Street or wherever we are is immaculate. Many, many, many thanks. So now look, Shakespeare, it strikes me, came up with an idea quite early on in his life, and he stuck to that idea reasonably consistently through his life. It's a paradigm of how to write a play, really, with a number of variations. But the narrative flows roughly like this. At the beginning of the play, he creates a crisis of one form or another, which is perhaps a political crisis, perhaps a personal crisis, perhaps a spiritual crisis. The rest of the play deals with the aftermath and echoes of that crisis. The paradigm follows the following course, that the protagonists enter some form of chaos, which is very often described in natural terms. It might be a forest, it might be a storm, it might be a shipwreck, but there is chaos in the middle section of the play, and in the last section of the play, there's some form of resolution. In other words, the players and the audience go on a sort of a journey, if you like. And I think it's a rather good metaphor for life, and it's certainly a good metaphor for education, it seems to me, and particularly for education for folk who are hoping to go into the theatre or film industry. because you really have to be prepared to go into chaos. What does it mean? It usually means, if you look at that metaphor, a forest or a shipwreck or a storm, there are no clocks in the forest, Rosalind says. No, Orlando says to Rosalind, doesn't he? There are no clocks in the forest. You can't walk in a straight line in a forest. You can't usually hear what's going on in a storm. So that's a rather long-winded way of saying that I've sort of, for this occasion, I've sort of drawn my life into 3 parts. I'm not saying the middle part was chaos, but kind of in a way it is. Trying to relate to our culture in the UK is a little bit difficult because obviously things are quite different here. But my life, my education, was predicated upon 2 factors, 2 things that happened at the end of the Second World War. One was the Butler Education Act, which meant that folk from my kind of background could go to decent schools and then go to university, which wasn't the case for my parents' generation at all. And the second thing was the creation of the Arts Council, which created a network of support for the arts, in particular for drama, around the country, which enabled folk like me, young directors, actors, designers, to learn their craft. Students here at Columbia may relate to this a little bit, but I studied English at university, my undergraduate, whatever you call it, my undergrad. And there were a lot of people who were doing drama there, and I increasingly got the sense that they didn't really know what they were doing, although they pretended they did, and they had absolute certainty and confidence in what they were going to do. And I sort of, you kind of believe them at first, but it crept up on me that perhaps that wasn't true. But most importantly, I realized that there was a body of craft that I simply did not have. And so I was kind of quite lucky that I chose to go to a drama school. That is certainly in those days, and to a degree now, because I'm now on the board of that drama school, taught a wonderfully actor-centered course for directors. That then folded, but then it's subsequently returned. And in a way, it filled in those gaps, those lacunae. And what I liked particularly about this course was, firstly, that it was actor-centered. That we did, as the directors, all six of us, however many there were, we trained as actors. Every morning at 9 o'clock, we did an hour's movement. We did 3/4 of an hour's voice. We did all of the acting exercises. We made a fool of ourselves next to the actors. We trained as actors. And that's been more useful to me probably than anything at all, because it enables me to have some form of empathy with what's going on in the center of the stage. And it was a very European-centered school. I liked it because it had a philosophy. And most training establishments, I don't know over here, but certainly in the UK, have no philosophy. Their philosophy is pragmatism and opportunism, which is fine and kind of understandable, but it had a philosophy. It was very European-centered. It's centered around the work of Stanislavski. It's centered around the work of Rudolf Laban. It's centered around the work of Jacques Copeau and André Aubet and the artists from the Théâtre des Quinze in France. And it's centered around the work of Brecht and Joan Littlewood. So very Eurocentric, but a wonderful, wonderful course. And at that time, I kind of fell in love a bit with France and Paris, and so it's rather nice being in this room here actually, and looking at these nice sights of the Place des Vosges over there. And, partly because then, students in France in the late 1680s, they actually had changed the world a bit. They brought down a government. they effected change. So I used to spend all my time over there, and I was very lucky, and I was taken, there was a wonderful, probably you won't know who he is anymore actually, a wonderful actor / director called Jean-Louis Barrault, who kind of took me under his wing and was very kind to me, and he let me sit in on all these rehearsals, and he would kind of give me tips, and Madeleine, his wonderful wife, would give me kind of the odd tips in what I could understand in my friend. And something stuck with me. And he was rehearsing a very good play, actually, sort of a boulevard comedy. And he didn't adopt the relationship that you and I have got. He did most of it from the wings. He stood in the wings when the actors were acting away out there. And then he would come out from almost behind them and say, and then he would talk to them almost from behind them. And I realised, of course, what he was doing. He was acting all the parts and then giving them help. Nothing wrong with that at all. But he was coming at it as an actor, and I liked that very much. And I liked the phraseology, the terminology. They didn't call it train. They don't call it training there. They call it formation, formation. The formation of a student, of an actor. That's much better. You train dogs, don't you? You don't do train actors. And when you go to the theatre, the audience assiste à, they assist the production. Very, very, very nice. And they don't rehearse, they repeat. They repete. So I liked all of that. And that set me up, I thought, perfectly for the theatre. But it was such an idealistic course that it taught you everything about the theatre except how to get a job. So I hadn't the slightest notion about how to get a job. So I couldn't get a job, so I went to work with children and housewives and stuff in Birmingham on bomb sites and stuff like that. And then I saw an advert to go to the Bristol Old Vic, which was fabulous. And it is one of those things that happen where you just simply need luck, really. And I hope the young people here who are hoping to go into this business have lashings of luck, because you really need it. The luck, for me, took the form of an astonishingly generous man who wasn't a great director. And there's space in our industry for people who aren't great directors. But he was a great producer. And he just gave. There was me and a designer who started on the same day called Bob Crowley, who's done a lot here now, vast amount, 15 Tonys, I think. Bob and I started on the same day. And he just gave us all this work to do. Loads and loads and loads of plays we were offered. Classics, Titus Andronicus, Timon of Athens, Love for Love, The Changeling, The View from the Bridge. We've got slides, by the way. It's all slightly embarrassing. Well, I can press a button, can't I? Yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful bridge. But what he also believed in, this guy, is the idea of a company. And we gathered an extraordinary company. That's Peter Postlethwaite, who died. But Peter was a great actor. And he played Eddie Carboni. And he was part of a company of actors that we put together that included Alan Rickman, Peter Postlethwaite, Lindsay Duncan, who's presently performing in the Edward Albee play, Danny Day-Lewis, Miranda Richardson. I mean, we put all these people together, and they all came to this regional theatre. And so we had an idea that was exciting, and it was supported by the government, and it was supported by the people in Bristol, and it was supported by the acting community. And we had 3 theatres, and we did stacks and stacks of plays. Now, this is where it becomes slightly odd, which is to slightly go into reverse. The guy who was the principal of the drama centre, my drama school, basically believed that Shakespeare was not particularly important as a writer, which, as you'll appreciate, is slightly eccentric view. He believed that Racine was the great writer, and that we should study Racine, and that's your man. Which meant that I left drama centre, and indeed went to Bristol, the Bristol Old Vic, knowing sod all about Shakespeare, because we weren't taught it really. And at university, I think I nearly failed my Shakespeare paper. Foolishly, I thought that enthusiasm and academic prowess were similar things. They're not at all related. So to love Shakespeare was irrelevant. So anyway, I arrived as an assistant director at the RSC, knowing not a lot about Shakespeare. I'm going to press that. I don't know what's next, actually. This is sort of quite interesting. That's not what the Royal Shakespeare Company. There's that, and there you are, look. That's Helen Mirren. That's Bob Hoskins. When I was an assistant at Stratford, I was asked by a wonderful, wonderful director who became a bit of a mentor to me before he died, called Michael Elliott, who was fabulous. His daughter, Marianne, in fact, she did Warhorse and the what's it called? Curious Incident, yeah. So that's Michael's daughter. And Michael was great. He had a philosophy, again, like the people at the Drama Centre, a very similar philosophy, because his background was the Old Vic School, which had certain key people that actually then became part of the Royal Shakespeare Company in the 1960s. But Michael said, you've got to get a star. If you're going to do a play like Duchess of Malfi, or as you saw, Dr. Faustus, those parts are written for people who not only have the intellectual energy, but they have the technique to fulfill those roles and astonish an audience. So I went out shopping, and I found wonderful Helen, actually. And she, look at that, isn't she gorgeous? And Bob Hoskins, he's died as well. This is terrible, isn't it? Yeah. Bob died. Postlethwaite was also in this. He died. I sound like Shallow, don't I? In Henry IV. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Anyway, but I want to address for 15, just to do a bit of a diversion now, 15 minutes, which really kind of slightly addresses the kind of how to do Shakespeare bit of the title to this little presentation. I was just very, very lucky at the RSC because there were wonderful people around me and wonderful, wonderful actors. And the first thing I did was with extraordinary actors, Richard Pascoe. He died last week. Isn't that terrible? I mean, I feel such a ghastly old fart if all my friends are dying. Anyway, so I was surrounded by people, and not very methodically, I picked up certain things that I thought were very, very important. It's been observed many times that Hamlet casually says to Horatio, "We'll hear a play before the king." Casually, he says it. He doesn't make a big deal about it but he does use that verb. He doesn't see them. They're not going to see a play. They're going to hear it. And that shift from here, the eye to the ear, or rather from the ear to the eye, is kind of a pretty central issue. And it seems to me that actors need to embrace this fundamental challenge about how you make people hear a play, particularly in the 21st century, because the great revolutions of the end of the 19th century of Freud and Marx and the great writer, actor, director Stanislavski mean that, whether one likes it or not, actors in our part of the world, in the West, it's different in the East, but in the West, eat, sleep, breathe Stanislavski. They approach their parts through the prism of Stanislavski's thinking. In other words, they start from the inside out. That's what they do. Whether they've been trained in Stanislavski or not is irrelevant. That's how they come at it. And that's how most rehearsal processes come in. And there's nothing wrong with that, because I find the kind of clash of different ways of approaching Shakespeare very energetic and dynamic. But you've got to make people hear, and I would use that word, that verb quite particularly, make. And there's nothing wrong with making people. And how? How does he do it? Just analyze the text, and so much of it is indeed in the text. And I've always thought that antithesis, apposition, juxtaposition is the fundamental thing that one should try and ingrain into actors. The most famous speech in English, right? To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep. No, I'm not going to do it all. Because I couldn't do it all. I'm not going to do it all. So what you have there is its apposition, its antithesis. It gives purchase on the text, and it gives an intellectual vigor because it's essentially dialectical. Two things rubbing against each other in opposition. And you can just find stacks and stacks, which I won't go through now because I'm gassing on far too long. But you can, look at any speech you like. And I would say to young actors, look for the antithesis, look for the apposition, and that's a good way in. The second thing, which interests me a huge amount, is metaphor. And it's interesting because I think metaphor, it's the highway to the unconscious, it's the highway to the imagination. It's that which a character doesn't necessarily know they're going to say. If you just have a quick look at, which we won't now, but have a quick look at Juliet speaking the Gallopé speech. It's dripping with metaphor. By the way, with metaphor, I would happily include simile, myth, all of those things. I mean, I just use it as a portmanteau word. Okay, it's dripping with it. And what does it tell us about her? It tells us so much about that young girl who's just emerging from puberty. She's obsessed by, not in a bad way, by the way, but obsessed by sex, and she's obsessed by death. And it's all through those metaphors. And she has no idea about that necessarily at all. Doesn't matter. It's not relevant whether she knows or not. But the actor needs to find a way in through that and look through. When the character can't articulate, cuz, my pretty little cuz, that cannot tell how many fathom deep I am in love, says Rosalind to Celia. It has no bottom. It's like the Bay of Portugal. Now, the Bay of Portugal being the Bay of Biscay, which was for British shipping, English shipping, where you often drowned. But you drown in love. It associates it with something incomprehensible, something to do with death almost. And it's all there. It's out there in the metaphor. And so dig out the metaphors. Look for the meter and the pulse. There's a great little piece that I looked up earlier, which I remembered from the Plantagenets. It's the pulse. It's the rhythm section. It's the and it was wonderful. I tell you, I digress here. I'm a great believer in digressions in rehearsals, but it was wonderful. I did this show with Kate Bush in the summer, and she got together this amazing band, only two of whom could read music, by the way. But they were sensational musicians, just sensational. And there were there was a drum and the percussionist, and there was the bassist, and they absolutely held it together. They were like these big guys, and they were all guys, big guys, just holding this huge experience together and varying it and changing it, and the musicians felt confident because these guys were under them, holding their butt. Fabulous. So look, so that's the meter and the pulse. So this is a little bit from one of the Henry VI plays, when York's just come back from Ireland and says, "From Ireland thus comes York to claim his right and pluck the crown from feeble Henry's head. Ring bells aloud, burn bonfires clear and bright, to entertain great England's lawful king." Now, yeah, it doesn't need any explanation, does it? I mean, you've got a pulse past perfect rhythm, and then it changes. Whack! Boom. Never, 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 never is powerful because it's the exact opposite rhythm of everything, almost everything else that's been said in King Lear, and this poor fucker at the end. I'm not supposed to say that, am I? He's got his little kiddie, his girl in his arms, and he can just say that word 5 times, and it's and the pulse is anyway. So that's kind of interesting as well, isn't it? And I became rather sort of interested in the sort of line endings. Why did I become interested in line endings? Because I think it helped me to understand how the characters think, and it helped me to understand how to do it, actually, how you might come up with some very interesting solutions. I can't verify this, but I was doing this with the guys the other Saturday. This is King Lear dividing the kingdom, and it's sort of quite interesting. And the question very often in middle and late Shakespeare is whether you run on and whether you pause at the end of the line. I mean, basically, I say pause as long as you like, as long as you pause at the end of the line. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. And you will come up with some quite interesting things. But if you, actually, I won't read that speech because it's a bit boring. Me doing it is rather boring. But what you get very often is you get a forward energy when you don't stop in the middle of the line, breathe, pause, and go on. And actually, when I did As You Like It, Alan Rickman played Jaques. He did a really, really interesting thing with this, is that instead of him playing some sort of, because he was quite young, some sort of rather, bit of an old bore, a club bore, all the world's a stage, that boy. He was very, very dynamic. And he played through all of the, maybe I even have that. He played through a lot of the lines. Sorry, there's a mess here. Oh, fucking hell. Sorry. Yeah, here we are. I found it. Yeah. This is what he did. Very interesting. So he says, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. His acts being 7 ages, full stop, middle of the line. At first, the infant, he did. I thought, that's good. So he pushed it forward, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy with his satchel, shining morning face, creeping like snail towards school, and then the lover. So instead of dwelling on each one, he pushed it forward, and it made it faster, which was interesting and sometimes quite desirable. It made it a bit quicker, but as I say, it had this intellectual energy underneath it. And I often say to actors, look at the line endings, and you will find you'll often find a really interesting acting choice that you may not have come against. Well, here's one actually, which you can choose or not choose, you see. Meantime, says King Lear, we shall express our darker purpose. Give me the map there. Know that we have divided is the end of the line. Know that we have divided in 3. Nagasaki, Hiroshima, blues and things. It's interesting, you could do that, or you might be a bit poncy to do that, but it kind of doesn't matter. There's an interesting choice there that's posed to the actor, absolutely for free. It doesn't need to direct you anywhere near. Anyway, so that's that. And try and instill in yourselves just a love of language, a love of words. And that's a really hard one. It's a hard one to teach. It's like pulse, rhythm. Very, very hard to teach. If somebody hasn't got rhythm, it's really, really hard to do Shakespeare with them, I think. And likewise, if somebody doesn't love words, I think it's quite tricky, because I think there's almost an understanding under what Shakespeare was doing, which is that we love words, we love punning, we love alliteration, we love assonance, we love doing things with language, we love being playful. So, but as I say, I don't know how you teach that. I don't know how you instill that. That's quite difficult. And the last thing I'd just say, in terms of one of the, sort of the things I picked up, really, which is storytelling, really, that every speech tells a story, that every speech has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and most speeches start with a sort of headline, really, that you need to sort of place up there, and that will kind of help you. Now I'm going to go back to this here, because this is probably going to be a bit more interesting. I press this. There you go. So look, again, I was very lucky that the powers that be at the RSC let me do this as my first Shakespeare and my first and in the main house. And I'd just seen Michael Gambon do Galileo at the National. I thought he was marvellous. And he was quite young. I mean, young for Lear. Like, I think he must have been in his 40s or something like that. So I rang him up and I asked him to do that. And he was very keen to do that. And then this is Antony Sher. And this is the poster. We got this guy, Ian Pollock, I think his name is. He did a whole series for me of stuff. And I loved his work. And that sort of interpretation there of the fool and the Lear came out of a couple of things. It came up partly out of Act 2 scene. There's a scene, I call it the bus stop scene, when King Lear and the fool are waiting for the bus, and they're chatting away, and all they're doing is filling in the time, right? And they're just natter, and the fool is coming up with completely, opaque jokes. And then, against the rhythm, Lear says, "I did her wrong." And the fool carries on. And then he says, let me not be mad. So, and again, it's absolutely against the rhythm. So we had this, we tried improvising with a sort of a kind of a, what would you probably call in this country, vaudeville. Music hall, we would call it, to a patter act. That's it, shtick. Which was very good, which Tony loved and Michael eventually didn't like at all, because it was driving you mad. Because you do have to watch your fool. And Tony was a performance of great genius, actually, and but it was pretty watchable, to say the very least. I mean, it was marvellous. And he did obey the first rule of being a fool, which is to be funny. Because most fools will come up with 1,000 reasons why they're not funny, and get the laughs, come on, because it makes the whole thing come alive. So, and also he was quite keen to make him into a professional fool, which I liked the idea of as well. This is Antony and Cleopatra. That's Helen, and that's Michael playing that. I lost my nerve on that. I wanted to do it without a designer, and then late on the Sunday afternoon, I started rehearsal on the Monday, I completely lost my nerve. So I rang up a designer and got a designer, which I wasn't sure was a good idea, but I did anyway. But that was lovely. I tell you why I didn't want a designer, because I think it's a trap of a play that it tends to encourage you to put lots of visuals up there, great big Rome and pyramids and donkeys and elephants and you name it, the whole lot's got it. But it's very interesting, when you just read it, if you're in Rome, you spend all of your time talking about Egypt. And if you're in Egypt, they spend all their time talking about Rome. So that struck me as rather interesting. And this kind of comes to this rather interesting challenge you have. Doing Shakespeare, because he was writing for essentially a non-visual theatre. We should go beyond that, haven't we? Yeah, there you are. Now Hilton was going to come tonight. Is Hilton here? No, he was going to come because he's married to Lindsay Duncan. I saw him the other night. Now, this was a real challenge, this one, you see, because how do you design a forest that has a lion in it and a rabbit? I'm not my brother is the zoologist, scientist. I think that's ecologically impossible. I think the lion would eat the rabbit. I think. So therefore, if you're too realistic with it, you're in trouble. But we couldn't solve it at all. We couldn't crack it at all. That's Juliet Stevenson. That's Hilda. We couldn't crack it. And we got this terrible thing. We did the first preview, and it had a fantastic cast. These guys, Rickman, Fiona Shaw, Leslie Manville, loads of really, really, really good people. And we did this first preview, and we all met up in the Dress Circle bar the following day, and almost all of the actors were wearing dark glasses. We were sort of all hiding from this thing we'd created on stage, which was like as funny as a car crash, really. It was pretty ghastly. Anyway, so, but that's a kind of a challenge of how you design Shakespeare. That's a real challenge. Okay, back. That's Henry V. That's Kenneth Branagh when he was 12, I think. This works rather nicely. I think I'll have this for the rest of my life. Which was, and again, there you see that play falls into works within that paradigm, doesn't it? That actually there's a crisis at the beginning, a political crisis about do we or do we not invade France? Is it legal / illegal? That sounds familiar, doesn't it? To go to war with a foreign sovereign power. So we did that, and I did that. That's one of the very few occasions I did that because I was rather shocked that my country went to war with Argentina with very little debate. I would say no debate. Again, this all sounds rather familiar, doesn't it? Almost no debate, and I found that quite shocking, really. So we did that. And I became interested with that in the notion of I'll speed up a bit. Okay?
No, I'm speaking now.
Okay. Of the public and the private. Because this play par excellence is about the public man, the private man. He goes on this journey, and it struck me that I tried this out on a history professor in Oxford, actually. And he kind of vaguely bought it, actually. Because I said to him, listen, up until when I was at school, I was taught history as being the interaction between personalities and objective events, you know? So, Robespierre and the Terror. Henry V and the invasion of France, etc., etc., etc. And I put to him, I said, well, don't you think Shakespeare invented that for you historians? And then, he huffed and puffed and sort of patronised me a bit, as academics always do, But it's very interesting with Shakespeare and the public and private and the rubbing together. Partly because his interest was the ceremony that leads to leadership, to fine leadership, and partly I think because he's just interested in what make people tick, really. So, and we divided the space in two. We kind of pulled out a lot of things. This is Crowley again. Pulled out a lot of things. We had an inner space and an outer space, and that dynamic seemed to be very interesting on that stage. So that's that. Space. This is Macbeth. Two Macbeths. This one was very well, and that one didn't. That's Jonathan Pryce, and that's Derek Jacobi, and that's Cheryl Campbell, who was the best Nora ever. The great Cheryl Campbell. And this one worked nicely, I think. We managed to do this thing with the set whereby it could quite physically change the space. So it could get small or big. And it's a play, it's a story that's sort of kept with me a very, very long time, and indeed up until this from the Metropolitan Opera, to this summer. And it's interesting looking at what Verdi did or didn't do with Macbeth. Very, very, very interesting. Verdi wrote the first version round about the time of the Risorgimento, round about the time of the dreams of the revolution, and the dreams of the reunification of Italy. And somehow he had this prescience. And one of the great things in the opera for me is he substitutes most of the England scene, the dreaded England scene, with this, one of the greatest choruses ever written. When I think it's 123 chorus members plus the dancers plus the extras plus the kids come over the back of the Met stage, and they sing this song about losing their country, and that the prescience of that just struck me as extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. The refugees, if you turn on your television tonight, it's so it defines so much the politics of Europe to this day. Try and understand Germany. Understand that between June 1945 and June 1946, 14.2 million Germans were moved from different parts of Europe into what is now Germany. That's an extraordinary figure, absolutely, but that's what happened. And so when people talk about, the euro and those things really matter because they're just one generation away. And Verdi somehow stumbled upon this, or wouldn't stumble on it, that's not patronising. He did this extraordinary thing with it, and so that was nice. and then more histories. This is Ray Fiennes. That's Penny Downey, who played Queen Margaret, all of them, which became a great, great part. And I learnt a lot from this man. In fact, he was going to be here tonight, actually, but he couldn't do it, which would have been really, really interesting, because I think his movie of Coriolanus is really, really interesting. Best Shakespeare movie I've ever seen. Why is it the best Shakespeare movie? Because he found a way whereby the extremity of situation gives birth to the language. Very clever. And I tell you what I learned from this guy. I learned the power of simplicity. I mean, you can see there, look at that focus. Plus the fact that he has this extraordinary vocal instrument. Great actor. Wonderful. That's my wife. That's my job. That's Hamlet. That's Kenneth Branagh as well. I don't know what that is. That's Hamlet as well. I think that's. Yeah, that is the ghost, isn't it? Imaginative, yes. Yeah, that's very good. The interesting thing with this, we couldn't do about this relationship. We couldn't really crack it. It was. We couldn't quite understand it. And there was a wonderful psychotherapist come academic called Murray Cox, who I'd worked with a bit, and I wrote the introduction for a book he wrote. And he was a great Shakespeare scholar, but he was also the kind of head of the psychiatric team at Broadmoor Hospital, which was where in England you put the violent loonies, okay, the really nasty ones. Anyway, we asked Murray in to help, and he was marvellous, and he identified a line. The line being a line of Laertes at the funeral of his sister. What ceremony else? Says this boy about his sister. What ceremony? And he said, and we extrapolated from that a whole, this girl whose father is killed, assassinated, and shoved in a grave, and then she is shoved in a grave out with no ceremony. And Murray talked about the way ceremony helps us as human beings to deal with the extremities of our time here. And that if you take that ceremony away, then you expose yourself to the perils of fear, chaos, anarchy, horror, all of those things. And that's what happened to this girl here. And she did marvelous things. She dressed up as her dad, her dad's dress suit. So that was that. That's Robert Stevens. Yes, great Robert Stevens, who was one of Larry Olivier's actors, his favourite actor, and was going to be the great inheritor of the crown, etc. Except for this, by which I don't mean water. and it was absolutely tragic, really tragic. So, but it was his life. But he had this in him. He had this. This is Falstaff, and he was astonishing, absolutely astonishing. But just before, I was at O'Carn's, which is the house that goes with the vicarage that goes with the job. And Deirdre Clancy, the costume designer, rang me up one morning and said, Robert's in the wardrobe and he's drunk. So I have to go in there and chuck him out of the theatre. But then he drank a bottle of vodka, you see. And you can't operate with a bottle of vodka in you. But he got through, and he got okay reviews for part one. Then we put the two things together, by which time he dried out a bit. And he put the two together on one day, and it was sensational, absolutely sensational. And it looked like he was making it up. And indeed, I rather insultingly said that to him after the run-through in Clapham. I said, God, it was brilliant, you just kind of did it, just made it up. He said, what do you mean made it up, Adrian? I worked on every single line, and of course he had really detailed work. But it looked like he'd made it up. That's a great one. The Winter's Tale, I did that as well. Yeah. So we're doing things with space and sort of silly things, wonderful things and stuff like that. That's Autolycus. We did it was at the beginning of Act 4, I think it is. Now here's a little thing. If you look at that, the sheep shearing scene, I say this to an American audience. Look at the sheep shearing scene, which is the scene when you really know the sheep shearing. It's very interesting. There's a narrative. The narrative is studied by 6 or 7 songs. Each song develops the narrative and reveals much more about character. Some songs are ensemble, some are solos, and some are duets. What's it remind you of? It reminds you of the great American musical, doesn't it? I mean, that's what was happened in the late 30s and the 40s, and it's all there. Act 4, Scene 2, I think it is. There you go. That's Winter's Tale. Sorry, I'll keep on going through. What's that? Lear. Oh, that's with Robert. I did that with Robert. Because he was going to die. I thought we should do that. And he did die straight after this. But this is the fool being a nuisance. So he's taking his trousers down, as you are. As you do. that's Simon Russell Beale as Edgar, coming out of, I don't know what he's doing actually. Anyway, he's poor Tom there. That's the dream. So I went from balloons to light bulbs. Yeah, that came out of the basic challenge of how you do forests and stuff like that. And two things, I thought two things. First of all, I said to Antony, who's the designer, I said to Antony that it should be one space. I don't want big set changes, it's not big set changes, it's one space, and different things happen within that one space, A. And B, we need to find a non-literal way of creating a forest, creating a chaos, if you like. So we got more light bulbs and some doors, light bulbs and doors. What's this? That's the same thing. And umbrellas. That's Lindsay and Alex. Just live, isn't that? It's such a great story, isn't it? I think it's a wonderful story. Great joy. So look, then really just in terms of part 3. So then I left the RSC and I've done lots of different things really. I could do a lot more opera, which I enjoyed doing a lot actually. I particularly enjoyed doing 17th and 18th century opera. I've ended up doing quite a lot of Verdi, as you do, I think, if you're an opera director. But I did Purcell's. I worked quite a bit in France. Worked quite a bit in France, and I did Purcell's Fairy Queen, and then I did Monteverdi's. Really interesting. Monteverdi's Ritorno d'Ulisse in Patria. Wonderful, wonderful opera. But what's interesting there is that the words come first. And if you don't get the words, you don't get the music. And the music comes out of the words. And we were fortunate that we were allowed to do it in this little theatre in Aix called the Jeu de Paume. And you could just talk. It was just 400 seats. It was a gift. And we had this great orchestra, Bill Christie's orchestra, Bill Christie and his orchestra, Les Arts Florissants. And then Handel, interesting as well. I don't love Handel. I like Handel because these. I love this form of the what are they called? Da capo, is it called? Yeah, da capo. The da capo arias, right? Which are kind of just basically when you sing the same thing 3 times. But I found that interesting because I saw it as a kind of cubist opera, whereby you can kind of walk around the aria, walk around the character, and see it from slightly different points of view. So that was all sort of quite interesting. And how am I doing? Pericles. Yeah, we did that at the round. I had this idea which didn't fully work. I think because people didn't get behind it actually. I had this idea of I was a bit Joan Littlewoody I thought, wouldn't it be great if you could create theatre like the best party you've ever been to in your life? The only difference is you have to pay for it, right? That's okay. But there would be music and food and acting and conversation, and you can hang out and you can loll around. And we did this. We did this at the Roundhouse, and for this play it worked wonderfully. And I designed this sort of thing myself actually. It was sort of a countersunk. So and then people on carpets down here hanging out. The whole up a bit of the Roundhouse in London, the old engine shed, looking down on it. And when people came, there was, what do they call these days, the fashionable, the aerialists. And there was food and drink, and it was great. It worked marvellously for this. So it was Pericles, which I love that play. It's just full of those last plays, full of hope, aren't they? They're about getting a second chance. That you do a terrible thing in your life, or a terrible thing happens in your life, or to someone you love. And those plays talk about coming through that and having a second chance, which is great. Oh, yeah. So it does the musicals as well, which are great fun, which are happy and joyous, and we did that for a couple of years here as well. Brand, and I've loved doing Ibsen. I find Ibsen so. Ibsen creates layers of atmosphere almost. And as you work, you build layers of atmosphere. So, and he was perfect for Brand. The person, I think it's about an artist rather than a pastor, a priest, because it's about a refusal to compromise. You know, I will not give in. I will not compromise my art / my religion. What's that? Alcina, Vienna Staatsoper. This was with Antony, Antony Ward. That was very. There's nice thing working with. I'm so sorry. Nice thing working with. I like working with opposite because they know their lines when you arrive. Which means that very often, for example, with this, and these are serious heavyweight international stars. You know, they all knew that, but I could work on day one with quite complex improvisations because they weren't doing all that, and they were completely secure. So that's a bit of Handel in Vienna. That's the Tempest, which I did in San Diego, which was very happy, and we did that in England as well. That's the King's Speech, which was very good. That's Kate. There you go. That's Kate Bush, which I did this summer, which was wonderful. I'd never done anything like that before. I was asked to do the wall with Roger Waters, but it's one of those jobs that has "fire me" written all across on the contract. It says "fire me," so I thought I'd get the hell out faster than they could before they could sack me. Tommy Mottola, Harvey Weinstein, Harvey I liked it. Anyway, so I'd done a bit of it before, but this was great. And she's a great kind of example for women, I think. You know, she's mid-50s. She's just who she is, you know, and is a musical genius. And we did this show at the Hammersmith Apollo in London, which may or may not, probably won't come here because she doesn't fly. She won't fly. She hates travelling. So I think if you didn't go there, you won't see it. What's that? Macbeth. Oh, that must be from rehearsal. I don't know what that is. Yeah, that's the first one. Look, what's his name? Demetrius is his name, isn't it? Yeah, that's the Macbeth here. That's with the chorus there. Here's just a tiny little thing. We were doing the scene when the discovery of the body of Malcolm. And Jimmy Levine, before he was ill, he's now better now, which is great. He kind of stopped the chorus with the choir and he says, "Hey, listen up. He said, look, you're all singing the same words. And you have to sing the same words. And loads of you are singing exactly the same notes as well. He said, but, hands up, who think Macbeth did it? Who think Macbeth asked other people to do it? Who think Macbeth is absolutely the bee's knees and it's irrelevant whether he did it or not? He said, okay, that's great. And then there were one or two other questions. He said, that's enough. Think that and sing it. Get your notes right, otherwise I come down like a ton of bricks, but sing it. And what happened is the richness increased exponentially. It's terrific. Good directing that was, I thought. Not from me at all. There you are, Anna. Oh, look at that. Somebody said to me the other day, did you know, Adrian, that she ended every single aria on her back? I'm not sure that's true, is it? Force of nature. Great artist. Great artist. There she is again, giving it a bit of welly. Then I went to Hong Kong and did Hedda Gabler. And I got ill with this thing called cold wind evil. I got. So watch out for it. You get it on aeroplanes traveling from New York to Hong Kong. Cold wind evil. That's Hedda. That's Desmond. That's me. Look at that posture. It's terrible, isn't it? There you are. That's it. Okay, I'm going to shut up. We have some time for Q&A, but I thought I would just start it off. I
wonder if you could talk a little bit about, you talked a lot about the actors' way in to Shakespeare and some of the things that they need to think about. How do you start with a group of actors when you're tackling a play? Where do you begin?
With actors?
Yeah.
Because as a director, your first sort of intimate relationship, so to speak, is with the designer. Tends to be with the designer. You spend a lot of time with the designer, which is great. And when you're comfortable with the designer, it's a relationship to treasure, I promise you, because it means you can make mistakes and stuff and just say anything you like and nobody cares really. Whereas once the actors are there, it's all a bit more pressured. With actors, I tell you what I almost invariably do is I start with them. I'm not a great person for sitting around table work. I'm always rather suspicious of table work because actors don't work like that. They work on their feet, they think on their feet. So I tend to do sort of quite abstract movement things like that, and then maybe read a scene, then maybe do one or two exercises that relate to the scene, try and give them a time in public to explore the private side of a character, the bit that's not seen, if you like, the bit under the surface, and then we'll build it up from there.
One of the things I was thinking about, because you did spend some time running a theater in this country, having run one there, when you were working on Shakespeare and the classics here, did you run into sort of differences of approach or methodology?
No, I did this with somebody here from that experience. The reason I wrote this book, by the way, How to Do Shakespeare, was as a consequence of, when I left the RSC, I didn't do Shakespeare for quite a long time. I had enough of it, really. But then I was doing a TV show in Canada, and then I was asked by the people who were taking over the Stratford Festival to open their season, and rather vain, actually, isn't it? I thought, yes, so I go up and I do Hamlet to open the season. And I found it very, very interesting for two reasons. One is we focused almost entirely on antitheses, appositions, almost entirely. And we found it became very political, very gritty, A. And B, I found that there was an appetite, a hunger for the kind of suitcase of skills that I could bring along with me. And I found exactly the same thing on the West Coast. Again, there was a hunger there, and I liked that particularly because there was a really interesting program whereby professional actors and MFA students worked together absolutely as equals, and it was very, very exciting. As in, we had very short rehearsal periods, and we kind of created a festival of creativity, as that's how policy.
That's great.
It was like that. Really.
We can open this up to other questions if people have. Yeah.
You mentioned Joan Littlewood earlier, twice actually, throughout this discussion. And I was just curious the impact of her on you. And secondly, when you read the corpus of Shakespeare, we talked about how you directed opera. I'd be curious some of the vignettes you have about interpreting the songs in Shakespeare, the parts where people are singing.
I missed the name at the beginning, sorry.
Joan Littlewood. You mentioned Joan
Littlewood. I did indeed.
Twice.
I did indeed twice. What was the question?
Well, how did she impact on you?
Oh, well, I never met her actually. She'd sort of retired really by the time I came into the business. I liked her anarchy. I liked her passion for Marxist theatre, by which I mean that she believed that theatre could actually change people. It wasn't just something you do before dinner, you know. It wasn't pastime. There was something essential about it, and I loved that. About her inheritance. It's interesting. You know, there's a little thing that I sort of hold with actually, which is Lawrence, D.H. Lawrence, in studies in classic American literature, when he's talking about Walt Whitman, he comes up with a phrase which says, the essential function of art is moral. Not aesthetic, not pastime, not entertainment, but moral. Then he repeats it 3 times, it being D.H. Lawrence, okay? But it's kind of interesting that, actually, that we're in the business of change, you know? And she took it to kind of crazy extremes, you know? But in terms of song, I mean, I sort of tried the sort of Brechtian idea once when I was at Bristol with Man is Man, whereby you kind of stop the show and sing a song, and it was sort of, it felt a bit precious actually. So I tend to go down the musical version now, and have songs that will yield the basic themes, musical themes of a show. And again, to young directors, I would say, if you find a composer, as I did with Sean Davey, who you can work with, cleave him to your heart or her to your heart, because they're so important and they can contribute such a lot. And, you know, Shakespeare loved music and uses music essentially.
Yes, in the back.
I was wondering if you could talk about the challenge of the fool in Shakespeare's many plays. I'm kind of curious as to how you interpreted him as sort of like a separate force that at the same time is repeated among many plays. Because in Twelfth Night, he's in King Lear.
Yeah. Well, I sort of do try, as I said earlier, I do try and make the fools funny, if at all possible. Now, Tony, that's very interesting, when he did that fool, he researched and he found that well, this is Stanislavski meeting Shakespearean acting, I suppose. He found that, because I said to him at the beginning, oh, well, I think he should do it for a living. I think he's a professional. And he found that very often disabled people were taken on as fools because, like in the playground, very often the person who's not the best-looking guy or the best-looking girl or whatever becomes the clown. They make people laugh because that's their way in to a difficult social situation. And so we worked at it from that point of view. And again, when I did King Lear in San Diego, we adopted a similar approach. Tony played him quite crippled actually, but the gentleman in California didn't do it that way, but came up with some marvelous ideas. Yeah.
So when you're doing Shakespeare, you're talking about when actors get to the end of the line, they can pause for as long as they want, you encourage that. But when you're moving that into, taking the play, taking that structure, moving it into a different medium, such as opera, where you have very fixed sort of metrical bars of music, how much freedom do you have to play with that?
Well, it's you basically. I mean, there are pauses in opera, and if you've got a nice guy on the stick, or woman on the stick, then you can negotiate those. but the thing in opera is that the conductor is the king, the director is number two. That's how it is. That's life. And if one doesn't accept that, then don't do it. I mean, and that's for quite good reasons, partly organisational reasons as well. That very often people say to me, "Do you want to be involved in the casting?" And I say no. A, because I don't know all the people that you guys know, and B, I don't have the time. I simply do not have the time to fly to Hamburg to listen to whoever. I can't do it. So I tend to get a cast.
Did you have a question down here?
Yeah, actually, about opera. I was curious, I guess this sort of comes in heels of your question about doing improv work with opera singers, and about what that's like and what kind of stuff you do, and I'd like to hear more about that.
Well, I tell you what I did a lot in Alcina, because it's very abstract, and as I say, it's all these repetitions and stuff like that, is we would do. Actually, something I did when I did Cosy in France, and I created what I call a tank, really, just of chairs, group of chairs, and I wanted to find this, and I sort of invented this back at Stratford. Actually, I wanted to find a way whereby I could I could investigate character, shape of a scene, without worrying about blocking. We're blocking, because I always find blocking is the easy bit. Actually, it's the easy bit. Yeah. So I would do this exercise with a circle of chairs, and there's one simple rule, which is that you have to be seated all the time, and you move when your thought shifts, which may shift while you're speaking, but it may also shift when the other person's speaking. If someone says, "Get out of the room, you horrible person," I might move because I've been called a horrible person. Or I might say, "To be," that's one thought. Or "not to be," that's a second thought. Whether it is noble and mind something as a fortune, third thought. So I would do this. And those singers in Vienna were wonderful. They found it so interesting because it's endless repetitions. It's like 20 words over 9 minutes. Therefore, you have to be so specific about your thought. Otherwise, you just might as well stare at each other. So I used that exercise a lot, actually.
Yeah, right here.
Hi. I wonder if you comment about Mark Rylance's role as Richard III, because when I saw it, I didn't realize it was so funny.
I can't. I didn't see it.
Okay.
So I have no idea. I'm sure he was marvellous.
Yeah, it was fun.
Hi, you spoke about 2 different productions used out of Macbeth, and you said one worked and one didn't. How or when do you judge whether your vision has been received by an audience in the way you hope it is?
Oh, it's clear. Interesting enough, the second Macbeth with Derek Jacobi did monstrously big business, mega business, everywhere it went. And in London and around the regions, it broke every box office record known to man because of Derek and the title. But it wasn't good enough. And that's me, that was my view. And I was just saying to the students the other day up the road that finally I don't know other people, I judge my own work. I have no idea what the critics will say. It's not that I don't care, but I don't, and sometimes they have very interesting things to say, but ultimately there's just got to be what I want to do, what I think is right. And it didn't work. And I knew it wasn't going to work. I had a kind of hunch it wasn't going to work because I had more design meetings on that second Macbeth than I have on almost anything. We worked for days on it. And then it was a funny thing happened, actually. The really weird thing happened that we did a preview, finished 10:30, and at 5:30 the following morning my daughter was born. And it was just wonderful. And I didn't give a toss. I didn't give a damn about who cares whether it's any good or not. I mean, I did it properly, obviously. And I made it as good as I could. But when you get that, nothing else matters really. It's all relative, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could speak to kind of the dilemma of putting Shakespeare from text to stage, and that you're not only adding to a canon of existing plays, but you're adding to a canon of existing performances, and productions and styles and things that have been done. In what way do you reconcile how you're going to do a show, specifically when you're the artistic director of a company, and not only do you have to make work that is meaningful and that adds to that canon, but also can sell tickets and keep the company afloat?
Well, to answer the last bit first, certainly at Stratford, I would know within 2 or 3 percentage points how much a show would sell. I could tell you within £100,000 what the take on a show would be during the course of a season. And that's just a skill you build up. And that would vary according to whether you've got Derek Jacobi or Johnny Sniggs or whoever in the part, okay? So you can work that out, and you have to kind of create a balance. But the boring thing about Shakespeare was that, of course, he only wrote a limited number of plays. And so you kind of, and because you've absolutely hit the nail on the head, because the dilemma is that you've got to create a balance whereby you've got to have a Romeo or a a dream in there or a Macbeth or something that's going to bank to enable you to do Pericles. You know, you've got to make it, and they come round very, very fast. Add to that the other things that a company like the RSC does, which is touring on a large scale, on a small scale, 3 theatres. I mean, it's mega. So it was very, 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 very difficult. I mean, I tend not to. I try and develop, as an artist anyway, 20/20 amnesia, so that I have no memory of what I've done at all. And I find that very, very, very useful. So I don't worry about stealing from myself. And I sometimes do, actually. People say, I say, well, that's a good idea. And they say, well, you did that. I think, good.
Is there one of Shakespeare's limited number of plays that you think is the most underappreciated?
I don't know, underappreciated. I mean, I think The Winter's Tale is one of the great things in our civilization, I have to say, because it deals with one of the most corrosive of emotions, which is sexual jealousy. Because it deals with the nightmare for anybody here who's had a child, the nightmare that your child will die. You know, it deals with these things. And so it takes you into some very, very dark places. But then there's redemption. And you come out. And you feel, that was a good journey. That was a very, very good journey. So that, but I don't think it's undervalued. I'm sure it's not undervalued at all.
But it wouldn't necessarily be one of the ones that people would flock to.
No, they probably wouldn't actually. No, but no, I've done it twice, and on both occasions, very, very happily actually. And the miracle of the statue moving is just it's a miracle. And we all know it's uncovered. We all know it's Samantha Bond or whoever it is. Of course we do, but you all literally suspend your disbelief, and that one of my plans is you've got to awaken your faith. And I think that's beautiful. Isn't that beautiful?
Yes.
Considering that Shakespeare's plays have been done for 400 years, and that so many people, brilliant people and not so brilliant people, have approached it and tried to divine its secrets, have you ever been in a situation where you've been startled by an insight or an idea that you've never read or heard about?
Well, I discovered the other day. I discovered the other day that something I did is now always done or done regularly, which is that the fool gets killed in the hovel, and apparently Simon Russell Beale did that. It's regularly done. I had no idea at all.
And that was your insight then?
Well, it wasn't. I wouldn't even claim it as an insight. It happened.
It was a choice.
It was no. I can tell you exactly what happened. Actually, was that I wanted a bit of Beckett in it. You know, Beckett, Shakespeare. So I put a great big dustbin on the stage, right?
Yeah.
And then it was the hovel, and there's the pillow. You know, draw the curtains with pillows on it. So there's a pillow around, and there's a dagger around, because all those things are in text. Boom. And then this kind of wild thing happens when Fool says, "Come on, here's Goneril, killer," and they're chasing each other round, and Tony was holding this pillow, right, and Michael Gambon goes, "Wow!" And then I said, "Oh, well, I think there's something really interesting here. 2 things I think you should do. One is, Tony, could you find a way whereby you get in that dumpster or whatever you call it, that big dustbin? One. And secondly, could you, Michael, in a safe fashion, penetrate that cushion and split his spleen or whatever happens to him?"
So in that moment, you saw it.
Yeah.
You saw it.
I saw it.
And
and we did it.
And that was the excitement of.
It was absolutely. It was perfect. He explains why he doesn't come back. It explains, and I'll go to sleep in the morning, and all of those things that are in there. But that happened out of a kind of a, it wasn't an improvisation.
And a kind of a thing where the audience watching had never seen it before either.
They'd never seen it before. But
And all of a sudden,
it's
that's
quite
when they go
regular.
back and say, "Oh, you should have seen this once."
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
That is absolutely right.
I love
and it's hugely exciting.
So you shouldn't be intimidated to thinking that everybody else, nothing's new, that everybody else
Oh,
has
no.
thought of those ideas before.
I'm sure. I don't think that for a second, because the great thing about theatre is that it is live.
And it's a new mix of new people, personalities, new generations,
Exactly right.
ideas.
And the audience assist à.
Yes.
The audience help
Ah,
and contribute
that
to it.
in the
Yeah,
audience.
that's right.
We've got time for like one or two more, right there and then there.
You mentioned the spontaneity in Robert Stevenson's performance, and I'm wondering, as a director, do you ever struggle with trying to create that quality in your performers in general? Are there exercises or?
Well, you can. Well, I do encourage that when they got to a certain point. I think they've got to know the text, and they've got to know the characters very, very, very well before they start riffing too much. I think I mentioned this to the students on Saturday. Over the years, I worked with a lot of the actors who were in Peter's Midsummer Night's Dream, the famous one, right? It's very, very interesting. Two things were interesting. One is that almost all of those actors who were in that show had done years of very strict verse work with Peter. Very strict. They knew iambic pentameters backwards. There was no let's make it all up stuff with them at all. Therefore they could play because they knew their stuff. One. Two, they played and played and played for 4 or 5 weeks, and in the last week Peter came in and said, "Okay, Sarah, I want you to come in through that door, run down to there and sit a thing, and then you're going to swing in from that, Alan. And at that point, Frankie, I'd just like you to run through the dark and stumble over them." He blocked it. Very, 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 very fast. It wasn't some sort of hippie sit-in or whatever. It was absolutely specific.
Yes, back here.
Have you ever gotten tired of any of the plays of Shakespeare? Is there one that you're like, I've had it, I'm not doing it again?
Oh yeah, loads of them. Yeah, no, you think, because I tell you, it's partly because you think I've got no more to say. I mean, Midsummer Night's Dream, because that production was around for 6 years. You know, we did it, we made a film of it, we toured coast to coast, we did 6 months on Broadway, we did a Far Eastern tour, we did a second Far Eastern tour. The reason being that the company was making a lot of money from it. And as the chief executive, I had to keep the money coming in. So I don't want to do another Midsummer Night's Dream. And I don't want to do the Winter's Tale again because I did it twice and it was just how I wanted it to be. And I don't want to do that again. There are some that, I wanted to do Richard II, I never got to do Richard II. I didn't complete the history. So there were some I couldn't, some I couldn't.
Great. We should probably wrap up, but thank you all so
Yeah.
much. And thank you.